at Hesperia High School and looked forward to studying abroad in Spain. Attending Western Michigan University put her in close proximity to her older sister, and Pam often stayed the night and babysat. When they arrived at Westland Mall, Danny kept driving when Pam tried to exit the van until he finally pulled his knife out, put it to her neck, threatened her life, and kidnapped her in broad daylight. Brent climbed into the back of the van and subdued Pamela until they reached Comstock, Michigan, roughly 10 miles away. Both men raped the woman more than once over the course of the afternoon, having to move the van several times due to passers-by. Pamela Fearnow was murdered by Brent Koster in the back of Danny's new van as he watched. Brent gagged her and covered her head with a plastic bag which he secured with a piece of rope. Once she was dead, Brent put her body on the side of a road, then looked up and saw a patrol car heading right for them. He yelled cops at Danny and ran into the woods. Danny and the sheriff's deputy did speak, but Pamela Fearnow's body lay undiscovered. He went back to his girlfriend's trailer and Brent called him there to get picked up. After Danny's shift at the Standard Station that night was over, they went back and further concealed Pamela's body. They had gotten away with rape and murder yet again, and Brent wanted more than ever to escape Danny Rain's influence, he said, but worried about being murdered himself. As a diversion, Brent asked Danny's girlfriend if she thought he should go back to school when it started. She said yes and talked to Danny about it, and he said that Brent should attend his junior year of high school. So he went, and this was how Brent got away from Danny Rains. He returned home to live with his parents and go to school. Ultimately buckling under the weight of his crimes, Brent told a friend that he had been a part of the 3 rapes and murders in their area over the summer. That friend told another kid, and when that kid landed in jail, he dangled the identity of the serial rapist and killers in front of the police for personal leverage. When picked up by the police on September 5, 1972, Brent initially denied involvement, but lawyered up and started to try and turn state's evidence. He took police to the north side of Kilowatt Lake and Pamela Fearnow's body 6 weeks later, on October 18, 1972. By late October of 1972, Rains was charged in the March 1972 rape and murder of Patricia Hawk, the July 1972 rape and murders of Claudia Bidstrup and Linda Clark, and the August 1972 rape and murder of Western Michigan University student Pamela Fearnow. By August of 1973, Rains had received his 4th and 5th life without parole sentences. Serial rapist and murderer Danny Arthur Rains continues to serve out his life sentences and is incarcerated at Lakeland Correctional Facility in Coldwater, Michigan. His younger brother, now 75-year-old Larry Lee Rains, is also incarcerated, serving out his multiple life sentences at Saginaw Correctional Facility in Freeland, Michigan. This serial killer's crimes were just becoming part of the area's distant memory when his older brother Danny and accomplice Brent Koster joined his ranks 6 years later. On April 6, 1964, 19-year-old Larry Lee Rains robbed a Battle Creek, Michigan gas station of $200 before shooting and killing the clerk, 20-year-old Custer Air Station Airman Vernon LeBen. The serviceman was only working at the mobile station to make extra money for college. Rains traded that murder weapon for a different .22 caliber pistol. 2 weeks later, on April 20th, 1964, he stole a vehicle in Lexington, Kentucky, and ended up at S&F Tire Company, a gas station in Manchester, Kentucky, where around 5:30 a.m. he shot and killed the clerk and made off with $125. 38-year-old Charlie Sizemore had been shot 2 times in the head, once while he was near the cash register, and the second time after Larry Raines dragged him to the bathroom. He next made his way back to Kalamazoo. Then, instead of targeting hitchhikers as his older brother one day would, the unemployed high school dropout who had been ousted from the army due to burgeoning mental health issues instead posed as a hitchhiker. Over Memorial Day weekend 1964, Larry Raines was picked up by a skater with the Ice Capades and his chimpanzee near Las Vegas, Nevada. At first, it was an amicable experience, but on the second day, he began holding the driver at gunpoint. He said he would take him to Michigan, although he was driving to Chicago. Raines intended to slide the entire vehicle into a river. The animal saved him, as the man said he was only freed after Raines couldn't figure out what he would do with the chimp because he didn't want to hurt it. When they reached South Haven, Michigan, Larry Raines released the man and his chimp after ordering him not to alert the police until 2 weeks had passed. The skater split the contents of his suitcases with his abductor, which would ultimately link the 2 men well before the 2-week cutoff. Only 4 days later, on May 30th, 1964, Raines was next picked up by and robbed teacher and father of 2, 30-year-old Gary Albert Smock of $3 before locking him in his own trunk and fleeing in the Good Samaritan's vehicle. The man was shot to death after he was told to stay quiet, but banged on the trunk from the inside trying to escape. Raines would receive life in solitary confinement at hard labor for this murder. However, that sentence was overturned in 1972, and a new trial resulted in a sentence of life without parole. Larry Raines next had driven to Elkhart, Indiana, and robbed gas station attendant Charles Edward Snyder of $100 before shooting him to death with Gary Smock's body just outside in the trunk of his own car. The 33-year-old clerk had recently gotten the job after 2 robberies forced the previous clerk to quit out of fear. Within a few days, Larry Lee Raines had told several friends about his involvement in Gary Smock's murder, and on June 5, 1964, police picked him up as he was leaving a friend's house. He'd confessed to his friend that he was a killer, and that friend had alerted police. As soon as he made contact with law enforcement, Raines admitted to the murders of Gary Albert Smock, Charlie Sizemore, Vernon LeBen, and Charles Snyder, along with a murder in Nevada around the time of the ice skater's abduction with his chimpanzee. His brother Danny had testified during his trials, answering questions regarding Larry's volatile temper and troubled stint in the military. He said that although they didn't get along growing up, he wished he could trade places with him. Although he had been released from a psychiatric hospital mere months before his murderous spree, Larry Raines' insanity plea did not hold up in court. The Raines brothers fall into a unique category of serial killer brothers who committed their crimes separately from one another. In exchange for testifying against Danny Raines, Brent Koster pleaded guilty in adult court on June 11, 1975. It took more than 3 years for the juvenile's case to come to a close as the United States Supreme Court was deciding whether minors could be charged as adults in late 1972. Like other Michigan lifers of the time, his case began being reviewed for parole after 10 years, and every 5 years after that until that parole board member went deeper after decades. 2 friends appeared virtually at Brent's public hearing, the first being his supervisor for 25 years in the now defunct Prison Legal Services program where he was employed as a paralegal from 1983 to 2005. They have remained friends since, and for 37 years in all. She was the staff attorney, then director of the overall program, and told the court that he continually demonstrated a concern for and a dedication to those he was assigned to help. She said she felt comfortable that Brent was rehabilitated and posed no threat to the community, and that she planned to be available to offer him support once on the outside. Brent's second character witness was a former Michigan Supreme Court staffer who also worked with him through the prison legal program with which she volunteered. She's known Brent since 2001 and told the court that she found him to be responsible, dedicated, and smart, while in the same breath acknowledging the horrific nature of the crimes he committed in 1972. But she reiterated that he was a child then, and is now a regretful, remorseful adult she would have no problem living next door to or introducing her family and friends to upon his possible release. Brent himself told the court that day, quote, "I cannot change the facts of my crime. I can only explain why they happened and why they will never happen again. I know it's bad form to lay any blame on a co-defendant, but in my situation, I believe it's justified. If I had not met Danny Rains, I know in my heart that I would never have become involved in crimes like this. I've had a difficult time openly discussing my crimes because of the shame and guilt and the unwillingness to fully admit to myself what I had done. I've avoided dealing with it for many years. Only within the last 15 years or so have I started to slowly face my demons. I also need to visit the graves of my victims and tell them how sorry I am for taking their lives. I want to talk to them and ask them for their forgiveness. I also need to personally tell the victims' surviving members how sorry I am for what I've done. I also need to say the same to my own family. Murderous Minors is brought to you by Best Fiends. With Thanksgiving behind us and Christmas right around the corner, the stress is at an all-time high, making it the best time of the year to crush some levels on Best Fiends. I love earning VIP time and whipping through levels even faster, plus spinning the wheel as often as I possibly can. Those gifts really add up. No Wi-Fi or internet connection is required, so you can play literally anywhere, anytime, through a rolling blackout, a blizzard, or whatever this doozy of a year tries to throw at you. Don't choose between binging and boredom, just choose Best Fiends. Over 100 million downloads and tons of 5-star reviews can't be wrong. Download Best Fiends free today on the Apple App Store or Google Play. That's friends without the R. Best Fiends. A transcript was prepared summarizing the entirety of the September 10, 2020 public hearing, and that report was then reviewed in an executive session of the Michigan Parole Review Board. The majority of the 10 members voted to release Brent Koster, now 64 years old, on January 21, 2021. The terms of his release include 4 years of supervised parole, and failure to meet all conditions will likely result in incarceration for the rest of his life. In the months leading up to the public hearing, the Kalamazoo County Prosecuting Attorney's Office did send a letter to the Michigan Department of Corrections, formally opposing the parole of Brent Koster. The July 30, 2020 letter read in part, quote, Mr. Koster's crimes were horrific and terrifying. His actions were that of a cold-blooded killer. We can only imagine the sheer terror his victims experienced as he toyed with them before killing them. What is also scary is the prospect of him being released back into society on parole, particularly when considering the sex offender risk assessment. The assessment notes the presence of multiple risk factors of either significant concern